Before we dive into the chaos, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next adventure. It started as a routine quarantine check, routine bioscan, routine bureaucratic headache, until the computer paused and informed them that Desmond's DNA did not match a single entry in a database containing 83 million species. The technician frowned. The screen flickered. And somewhere in containment, an apex predator lifted its head with sudden interest. Zilzanvira stared at her terminal as if it had personally betrayed her. She had processed biological clearances at this intergalactic station for nearly an entire cycle. In all that time, the Galactic Archive had never failed to identify a species. Not once. The system was absolute. It catalogued everything, from microscopic parasites to continent-sized colony organisms. It was exhaustive, flawless, unquestioned. And now it was telling her that the human standing inside her scanner did not exist. There has to be an error, she muttered, initiating a deep scan protocol. The chamber hummed, projecting layers of holographic data around Desmond's relaxed figure. He stood with his arms crossed, looking more like someone waiting for a delayed shuttle than undergoing genetic scrutiny. "Is this going to take much longer?" he asked. "I've been standing here a while." "The system is processing," Zil replied without looking up. "Standard biological verification requires complete genomic analysis before clearance." "Standard," Desmond repeated. "You've scanned me 4 times because the results keep changing." She hesitated. In her entire career, she had never had to explain this. "The archive isn't recognizing your genetic structure." Desmond blinked. "Meaning?" "It means," she said carefully, "that according to a database containing biological records from 83 million classified species across known space, your DNA matches none of them." He gave a faint smile. "So, I'm special." "You're unclassified," she corrected, "which should be impossible for a species already in contact with galactic civilization." The scanner completed another cycle. Lines of data flooded her screen, each more unsettling than the last. Genetic markers that should never coexist. Evolutionary branches that contradicted each other. A biological profile that looked as if fragments from dozens of species had been stitched together into something that somehow worked. No match found. Genetic structure unrecognized. Classification unknown. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. Then the alarms began. Not breach alarms. Not security alerts. Biological stress warnings from the Predator containment wing. 30 indicators flared across the monitoring grid at once. Zil's secondary heart skipped as she pulled up the observation feeds. Every carnivore in containment had turned in the same direction. Toward Desmond. A juvenile Kester pressed its face against reinforced glass, fogging the barrier with slow breaths. A pack of Dray hunters stood in perfect formation, aligned with unnatural precision. Even solitary species, creatures that ignored everything except feeding cycles, had repositioned to face the scanning chamber. "What's happening?" Desmond asked quietly. Before she could answer, movement flickered on another feed. The Vrax containment cell. The reinforced enclosure holding the station's most dangerous resident. The Vrax hadn't moved in cycles. Confiscated from a legal trade in the Corinthian belt, it spent most days conserving energy in the center of its cell, as apex predators do when they don't need to hunt. It was standing now. Massive. Muscular. Built from ancient predatory instinct. It moved with deliberate precision toward the barrier, each step controlled, until it pressed against the reinforced wall. 6 inches of military-grade glass. 3 structural walls between it and the scanning chamber. It shouldn't have been able to see him. Yet its eyes were fixed on Desmond's exact position. "Okay," Desmond said slowly. "That seems bad." Zil's fingers flew across her console, pulling up biosignature analytics. The chamber was sealed, shielded, designed specifically to prevent biological signals from escaping. But the data was undeniable. Within seconds of his scan completing, every predator in the facility had oriented toward him. "That's impossible," she said. "They can't know you're here." Desmond watched smaller predators pacing in synchronized arcs. "They definitely know something." She triggered an emergency channel. Moments later, Zig Saracotis, station security chief, appeared in holographic form beside her terminal. Methodical. Experienced. irritated at being interrupted. "What's the emergency?" he demanded. "The biological archive rejected a scan," Zil replied quickly. "Unclassified species. But that's not the issue." "Then what is?" She gestured to the containment feeds. Saracotus's expression shifted, annoyance fading into confusion, then something closer to concern. "They're all oriented toward the scanning chamber," he said quietly. "Across multiple species," Zil added. "Different evolutionary branches. Predators that have never displayed coordinated behavior." "That's not possible. The chamber is isolated." "I know." She pulled up Desmond's genetic profile. "But look at this. The system can't classify him. His DNA doesn't match anything in our archives." The holographic data hovered between them, unresolved and impossible. And every predator on the station was watching him. Zizek's Aodi studied the incoming data, his expression tightening with every line. "How can they recognize something that doesn't exist in the archive?" he asked quietly. It was a fair question. The Galactic Archive functioned by cataloging biological patterns, genetic markers, evolutionary adaptations, biochemical signatures. Predators recognized prey because those patterns were etched into instinct over millions of cycles. You couldn't react to something your species had never encountered. "Show me the predator stress analysis," Zizix ordered. Xylan Vera pulled up the containment wing diagnostics. Every carnivore was displaying elevated heart rates, heightened awareness, defensive postures. Not aggression. Not hunting behavior. Recognition. "They know him," she whispered. "They can't," Zizix replied. "His species isn't classified." Desmond cleared his throat. "Just pointing out I'm standing right here and can hear all of this." Xylan turned toward him. "Have you ever visited this station before? Encountered any of these species?" "First time here. I barely know what half of them are called." Zizix stepped closer to the holographic display of Desmond's genome. "Run a secondary cross-reference with predator instinct databases. I want to know exactly what they're responding to." Xylan initiated the program. The system compared Desmond's biosignature against known instinctive recognition triggers. The results appeared within seconds. Her blood ran cold. "This can't be correct," she said. "What is it?" Zizix demanded. She glanced at Desmond, then back at the screen. "According to this analysis, his biosignature is activating ancestral recognition responses across multiple apex predator species. Different evolutionary branches. Species that diverged millions of cycles ago." "That's impossible," Zizix said sharply. "Recognition patterns are species-specific." "Unless," Xylan said slowly, "the pattern they're detecting predates the species themselves." In containment, the Vrax remained pressed against its barrier. It wasn't pacing. It wasn't striking. It simply stood there, breathing in slow, steady rhythm. Watching. Waiting. "So what are you saying?" Desmond asked. "They've met humans before?" "No," Xylan replied. "But something in their evolutionary memory has. Something their ancestors encountered. Something significant enough to leave a permanent imprint on survival instinct." Across the facility, the predator feeds showed the same posture repeated over and over. Not attack. Not retreat. Recognition. Zizix accessed station security controls. "I'm locking down the predator wing. Until we understand this, the human stays away from containment." "Agreed," Xylan said. Desmond raised a hand slightly. "Quick question. What happens if they decide the containment cells aren't thick enough?" No one answered. On the monitors, the Vrax leaned harder against the barrier. Metal groaned under the strain. Then it began testing the perimeter of its enclosure, slowly, methodically, probing for weakness. Back in Xylan's lab, a hastily assembled scientific panel gathered. Specialists from across the station stood shoulder to shoulder, staring at the most baffling biology problem any of them had ever seen. "Let me clarify," said an insectoid xenobiologist named Chix Thermal. "You're telling us an unclassified species is triggering instinctive recognition responses across multiple evolutionary branches?" "Not just triggering," Xylan corrected, "bringing up holographic projections of Desmond's genome. Activating deep ancestral patterns. Species separated by millions of cycles are reacting identically. That shouldn't be possible, Zizix said from the back of the room, arms crossed. And yet, Xylan gestured to the data, it's happening. A voice crackled over the comm system before a hologram materialized beside the display. Sorry I'm late, Naomi said. Had to finish docking procedures. Why is half the predator wing acting like it's under siege? We're trying to determine that, Zizix replied. Naomi scanned the genetic projections, then the behavioral data, then back to the genome. Oh, she said. You scanned Desmond. Everyone turned toward her. You say that as if you expected this, Xylan said carefully. Not this specifically, Naomi admitted. But Desmond does tend to make predators uneasy. We assumed it was just his presence. This isn't personality, Chick's Thermal said. This is biochemical recognition at a species-wide level. His biosignature is producing markers that, he paused, fingers moving rapidly through the data streams. Wait. These markers, they correlate with persistence hunting. Silence fell across the lab. What is persistence hunting? Another researcher asked. An ancient predation strategy, Chick's Thermal said slowly. The predator does not ambush. It does not overpower. It follows continuously until the prey collapses from exhaustion. That's terrifying, someone murmured. That's efficient, Naomi corrected. Humans are very good at it. Xylan felt her secondary heart skip again. Define very good. Our ancestors would track a target for days, Naomi said casually. Through heat, across terrain shifts, over mountains if necessary. They wouldn't sprint. They wouldn't rush. They would just keep moving. Eventually the prey overheated or collapsed. Then we caught up. The room grew very still. Days, Zizix repeated. However long it took, Naomi confirmed. Humans specialize in endurance. We're not the fastest. We're not the strongest. But we don't stop. Chick's Thermal pulled up comparative instinct data, his movements growing more urgent. This explains the biochemical response, he said. Predators evolve to counter threats they can escape. Ambush hunters. Pack hunters. Even pursuit predators with limited stamina. He looked up slowly. But a persistence hunter. His voice lowered. There is no escape. You can run. You can hide. But if something never stops tracking you. That's not a predator, someone whispered. That's inevitability. So you're saying every predator in this station recognizes humans as something they can't escape? Xylan Vera asked. I'm saying their ancestors did, Chick's Thermal replied. And that memory is carved so deeply into survival instinct that it's still triggering millions of cycles later. A junior researcher lifted one trembling appendage. How many species did humans hunt this way? Naomi considered the question. Most of the large prey animals on our planet at one point. Deer, antelope, even megafauna before they went extinct. You hunted them to extinction? No. Climate shifts did most of that. We just hunted them while they were still around. That clarification did not comfort anyone. A new voice joined the channel. Hey, just saw Naomi's message. What's happening? Your species is causing an existential crisis, Zizix said flatly. Which one? We cause several. Xylan summarized quickly, the unclassified DNA, the predator reactions, the persistence hunting markers. Silas listened, then laughed softly. Oh. That actually tracks. How does any of this track? Chick's Thermal demanded. Humans are unusual, Silas said. We didn't evolve as classic apex predators. We became something stranger. We aren't the fastest or the strongest. We're just extremely good at continuing to exist near something until it can't ignore us anymore. That may be the most disturbing hunting strategy I've ever heard, someone muttered. It gets worse, Naomi added. We didn't always kill exhausted prey. Sometimes we chased them until they couldn't run, and then we kept them. Domesticated them. The panel processed that in stunned silence. You're telling me, Zizix said carefully, that humans would pursue prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, and then choose to befriend it? Worked with wolves, Silas replied. Now we have hundreds of breeds of domestic dogs. Different sizes, temperaments, functions. How many species did you do this to? Chicks Thermal asked. Silas began counting. Wolves. Cats, though they may have domesticated us. Horses. Cattle. Sheep. Goats. Pigs. Chickens. Ducks. Geese. Rabbits. Ferrets. Various rodents. Several bird species. Stop, Zizix said. You're only at mammals and birds. We also domesticated insects for honey, Silas continued calmly. And there's strong evidence we formed symbiotic relationships with specific bacteria and fungi. Xylan raised a hand. Let me be certain I understand. Your species encountered predators and prey across your entire planet, pursued them so relentlessly their options became death or compliance, and then turned the survivors into companions. When you phrase it like that, it sounds strange, Naomi said. It is strange, Chicks Thermal snapped. That is not how food chains operate. That is not how evolution works. You cannot simply decide entire species will become your friends. Of course you can, Silas replied. It just requires patience. And creativity. An alert flashed across Xylan's terminal. Her blood went cold again. The Vrax, she said quietly. It's no longer just testing the barrier. The holographic display zoomed in on containment. The Vrax had systematically mapped every structural weakness in its enclosure. Now it applied steady, calculated pressure to a specific reinforcement seam. How long until breach? Zizix demanded. Xylan ran projections. At this rate, less than one cycle. Is it trying to escape? Someone asked. No, she said, watching the creature's orientation carefully. It's trying to increase distance from Desmond. Naomi leaned forward. Where is he? In secure holding, Zizix replied. Biologically isolated. That won't matter, Chicks Thermal said, studying the predator data feeds. They don't need direct sensory input. They know he's here. Ancestral memory doesn't require proximity. So what do we do? A researcher asked. Silence settled over the lab. On every monitor, the same image repeated, predators frozen in focused recognition. The Vrax continuing its deliberate work. We could relocate him, someone suggested. Reports from other facilities are coming in, Zizix said grimly. Any station with human personnel is observing similar reactions. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. Apparently being the evolutionary anomaly has consequences. This is not amusing, Xylan said sharply. A little amusing, Silas countered. From a certain angle. The Vrax's cell groaned again. Stress indicators climbed toward critical. We need a decision, Zizix said. The containment wing will not hold forever. Xylan studied Desmond's genetic profile one final time. Unclassified species. Persistence hunter markers. Recognition responses embedded in ancient instinct. There is one option we haven't explored, she said slowly. What option? Zizix asked. Let Desmond interact with the Vrax. The room erupted instantly. That's reckless. That's insanity. You're proposing we remove containment? Xylan ignored the protests. The predators are not displaying aggression. They're attempting to establish boundaries, distance. Containment forces proximity, which increases stress. If we allow controlled interaction, the recognition response may stabilize. So your solution, Zizix said, voice tight, is to place an unclassified persistence hunter in direct contact with our most dangerous apex predator? Either that, Xylan replied evenly, or we wait for the Vrax to breach containment on its own and address the situation without supervision. No one had a better alternative. On the monitors, the Vrax continued its patient, methodical pressure. Time was narrowing. Moments later, the corridor outside containment felt longer than it truly was. Desmond walked down its center calmly. From a reinforced observation post, Xylan watched alongside armed security teams who all understood they would not have time to react if this went wrong. This is the worst idea anyone has ever approved, Mix muttered over the comm. Noted, Desmond replied evenly. At the end of the corridor, the Vrax waited. The moment the decision had been made, It had stopped testing the damage in its cell. Now it stood motionless, massive, silent, focused, watching the human approach. Biosignatures are stable, Xylan Vera reported. The Vrax's stress hormones are elevated, but not critical. And Desmond? Silas asked. Barely elevated. That's just normal for him, Naomi said. He should be terrified, Mick muttered. That creature could tear him apart in seconds. Desmond reached the final barrier. The containment field shimmered between him and the apex predator. He stopped, hands relaxed at his sides. I'm disengaging the barrier, Xylan said. 3, 2, wait, Mick started. 1. The field dissolved. For a long moment, nothing happened. Human and predator stood facing each other across open space, perhaps 20 paces apart. The Vrax was immense, dense muscle layered over ancient predatory design. Its eyes fixed on Desmond with cold precision. Desmond didn't advance. Didn't retreat. He simply maintained eye contact and breathed steadily. Why isn't it attacking? Someone whispered. Because it's conflicted, Chicks Thermal said, watching the bioscan feed. Every surface cue suggests prey, no claws, no natural weapons, physically weaker. But deeper markers are signaling threat. The Vrax took one step forward. Its claws scraped metal. Desmond did not move. Another step. Close enough now that Desmond could likely smell it. Predator musk, sharp and heavy, the scent of something built to kill. Still, he remained steady. His heart rate, Xylan said quietly, almost unchanged. Persistence hunter, Silas murmured. We're very good at waiting. The Vrax began circling, testing angles. Desmond pivoted just enough to keep it in view, but otherwise held position. No challenge. No fear. Just calm presence. It's going to strike, Mix whispered. Seconds stretched into minutes. The Vrax continued its slow orbit. Desmond tracked it with minimal motion. No aggression. No panic. Just patience. This is extraordinary, Chicks Thermal breathed. The Vrax is experiencing cognitive conflict. Prey response is active, but survival instinct is overriding attack. Why? Xylan asked. Because he isn't running, Naomi answered. And anything that doesn't run from an apex predator is either foolish or more dangerous. The Vrax stopped circling. It stood directly in front of Desmond now, close enough to lunge. Its muscles tightened. Security teams locked weapons into aim. Then slowly, deliberately, the Vrax stepped back. 1 step. 2. 3. It retreated to the far wall and lowered itself into a resting posture. Eyes still locked on Desmond, but the tension had shifted completely. It submitted, Mick said in disbelief. It assessed, Xylan corrected, and concluded engagement would be a mistake. Desmond exhaled softly and turned away. The Vrax watched him leave, but did not follow. Back in the secured corridor, Mix demanded, How did you know it wouldn't attack? I didn't, Desmond said. But running would have guaranteed it. Predators chase what flees. And if it had attacked? Desmond shrugged. Then we would have learned something else. Xylan was already compiling data. This changes everything. It's not species recognition, it's strategy recognition. The Vrax identified Desmond as a persistence threat and calculated retreat as optimal. Because humans don't stop, Silas added. Because you can't stop, Chicks Thermal said slowly. Your entire species is built around continuation. Not fastest. Not strongest. Just most enduring. Every predator abandons pursuit when energy cost outweighs benefit. But persistence hunters simply keep going. He looked at the monitors. The prey runs for hours. You're still there. It hides. You track it. It fights. You wait. That's disturbing, someone whispered. That's survival, Naomi replied. Across the station, incoming reports began to flood the system. Predator agitation levels were dropping. They weren't relaxed, but the frantic edge was gone. They observed the Vrax encounter, Xylan said. And something in ancestral memory recalibrated. Real-time behavioral adaptation, she continued. They're learning either to coexist with the recognition, or to avoid confrontation. Same outcome, Mix muttered. Silas chuckled softly. Humans are very good at turning "you should avoid me" into "we should probably get along." How? Zizix asked. Patience, Naomi said. And usually food. But mostly patience. Xylan looked toward Desmond, who was calmly accepting a bottle of water from a technician, appearing almost inconvenienced rather than victorious. Your species domesticated wolves using this method? She asked. More or less, Desmond replied. Minus the orbital station. And what did wolves become? Everything from lap companions to working animals. Different sizes, behaviors, roles. All from one base species. The panel exchanged unsettled glances. How many species have you done this with? Chicks Thermal asked cautiously. On Earth. Desmond considered. Dozens. We're social creatures. You're unsettling creatures, Mix said. A bit of both, Silas replied cheerfully. On the monitors, the Vraks remained resting. Alert, aware, but no longer agitated. Somewhere in its ancient predator mind, a boundary had formed. Not from dominance. Not from violence. From patience. From something that did not flee. Something that did not quit. Something unclassified, but unmistakable. We need to revise galactic biological protocols, Zizix said at last. Revise them to say what? Xylan asked. He studied the data. The predator responses. Desmond casually discussing domestication as if it were a hobby. That humans are not merely a predator species, Zizix said slowly. They are something evolution never quite designed safeguards for. The Galactic Biological Council convened 3 cycles later in what many would later call the most uncomfortable scientific assembly in recorded history. Xylan Vera stood at the center of the chamber, presenting her findings to a hall filled with xenobiologists and deeply uneasy policymakers. Behind her, holographic displays projected Earth's ecological history in painstaking detail. Humans did not survive by becoming apex predators, she began. They survived by systematically befriending, or domesticating, anything capable of killing them. A council member lifted an appendage. Defined systematically. Xylan expanded the display. Wolves converted into companion animals. Horses into transportation. Numerous prey species transformed into protected food sources. Birds of prey trained for cooperative hunting. Venomous reptiles kept as domestic companions. The chamber grew quiet. And species that resisted? Another member asked. They studied them, Naomi said from the back of the hall. Until they understood them. Then they tried again, with a different method. Zizix Oricidus stepped forward with a security assessment. Human presence now spans 86 facilities across 12 sectors. Each location reports identical behavioral patterns. Initial ancestral recognition response, followed by adaptation. Predators are not aggressive. They are cautious. Cautious of an unclassified species, someone murmured. Cautious of a persistence pattern, Chicks Thermal corrected. Humans are biological generalists optimized simultaneously for endurance, tool use, social cooperation, hunting strategy, and environmental adaptation. This contradicts established evolutionary theory, a counselor protested. They did not specialize, Xylan said. They generalized so aggressively that they became unpredictable across every ecological category. Mix Seemanx added the tactical summary. They do not align with standard threat models. Not apex predators, yet treated as superior threats by predators. Not prey, yet capable of bonding across species barriers. So what are they? Demanded another council member. Evolutionary wild cards, Xylan answered. Meline, another human consultant, leaned forward. You're overanalyzing. Humans are stubborn and social. We dislike isolation and we reject the idea of impossible outcomes. You turned wolves into domestic companions, Zizix said. That borders on ecological warfare. We call it friendship, Meline replied. After extended deliberation, the council reached consensus. Humans would receive a new classification, adaptive social apex, a category created specifically for species that defied traditional evolutionary frameworks. All predator species would receive pre-contact briefings prior to human interaction. The briefings should emphasize what? A coordinator asked carefully. That humans will attempt social bonding, Xylan said. Regardless of whether it is tactically advisable, Naomi added. Or desired by the other party. The coordinator looked unsettled. You're suggesting humans will attempt to befriend organisms that intend to kill them? We will attempt friendship, Meline said calmly. Intent is secondary. Mix pulled up compiled reports. Since initial contact, humans have attempted to bond with 6 high-risk predators, 3 toxic species, and 1 partially extra-dimensional organism. And the last case? A counselor asked cautiously. Still ongoing, Silas replied. Progress is promising. Limited research partnerships were approved, with extensive oversight. Until Desmond, who had remained quiet throughout the proceedings, raised a hand. Quick clarification, he said. Do these new protocols apply to species we've already begun interacting with? Every council member turned toward him. Define already begun, Xylan said slowly. Remember the juvenile reptilian predator from the rehabilitation wing? The one that injured 3 handlers? Yes, Xylan replied. Desmond activated a holographic image. This is Rex. The display showed Desmond seated casually with the reptilian predator curled across his lap, appearing unexpectedly content. You named it, Zizix said faintly. It responds to the name. It also sits on command. We're currently working on fetch. Silence swept the chamber. How, Mix asked carefully, did you domesticate a non-social species in under 3 cycles? Patience, Desmond replied. And ration treats. You bribed a predator into companionship. I prefer to call it mutually beneficial bonding through positive reinforcement. Xylan closed her presentation files with visible restraint. Humans are cleared for galactic integration under supervision, she announced. Domestication protocols will be implemented. And we hope humans comply, Zizix added. No guarantees, Silas said lightly. Later, on the observation deck, Zizix found Xylan standing alone, staring at the stars. Are you well? He asked. She nodded slowly. Humans have been present for less than a cycle. In that time, they have domesticated one supposedly impossible predator, established bonds with multiple high-risk species, and forced every major facility to revise long-standing biological protocols. And what happens in 10 cycles? In 100? Zizix said nothing. They do not adapt to environments, she continued softly. They persuade environments to adapt to them. Through social persistence. That is concerning. The concerning part, she replied, is that they are sincere. No conquest. No malice. They simply refuse to accept that something cannot become a friend. From down the corridor, a familiar voice echoed. Good boy. Yes, you are. Who's a good apex predator? Zizix made a final notation in the galactic record. Recommend continued monitoring of human socialization patterns. Not for containment, for documentation. Xylan updated humanity's permanent file. Genetic classification, unmatched. Behavioral classification, adaptive social apex. Status, persistent. Projected outcome, inevitable social integration. His DNA matched no known species. Yet every predator recognized him. Not because they had encountered humans before, but because somewhere deep in ancestral memory, something remembered being pursued, until it stopped running. And then somehow, becoming companions with what had been chasing it. Classification finalized, adaptive social apex. Recommendation, accept integration. This was only the beginning. Subscribe now, because the next chapter is just getting started.